explorers, it's your adventure podcast hostess with the mostest, Katie Staples. I'm going to share my travel stories, tips, and tricks for exploring and creating unforgettable experiences and memories. Find me on Instagram at the.great.escape.podcast so you can follow along and I can hear from you. This episode is all about Arches National Park in Utah. I visited July 2023 on my 2-month road trip with my dog, Molly. We had just done Canyonlands and stayed in Moab, Utah in between. Arches National Park is obviously known for the over 2,000 natural stone arches there. You heard me right, over 2,000 natural stone arches. Its unique landscape and stone structures make it a must-see for nature photographers. In fact, 11 movies have been filmed here, including Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Thelma and Louise, and Hulk. President Hoover made Arches a national monument in 1929. Boundaries have changed twice before becoming a national park in 1971. It was enlarged in 98 to now include over 76,000 acres, and yet it's still only the 19th smallest national park out of 63. By comparison, Yellowstone is 29 times larger. Arches has gotten very popular over the last few years. You must have a timed entry for the months of April through October if you're entering during the hours of 7 through 4 p.m. So anytime between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. in the afternoon, if you'd like to enter the park during the months of April, May, June, July, August, September, or October, you get to have a timed entry card. I was ticketless, and so I got there at 6:45 in the morning. That's before 7, so I was good to go. If you'd like to come in the evening to do a sunset tour, you're good to go any time of the year. I used my America the Beautiful Pass, which is $80 for unlimited national park visits in 1 year. So this trip was essentially free for me. It's usually $30 a car. The park is busiest from 10 in the morning till 3 p.m., and parts of the year you'll experience difficulty finding parking or people in the background of all your photos, and long lines waiting to get into the park. Be ready for the sun and heat. There is very little shade in Arches National Park. Bring plenty of water, wear sunscreen, cover up like with a hat and sunnies, and eat salty snacks beforehand so your body can retain water. Unfortunately, I was beyond dehydrated because I was on the tail end of a stomach virus that knocked me out for almost a week, and I actually carried my Pedialyte with me on the trails. I would recommend spending 2 to 3 days in Arches to see everything and do all the hikes. I did as much as I could in 1 day because I was so sick. Now, the good news is the elevation range is only 4,000 to 5,600 feet, so you don't need to acclimate yourself there like at Bryce Canyon on the other side of the state. The hikes aren't too challenging, yet I definitely don't recommend doing them midday in the summer. Go as early in the day as possible to beat the heat. There's one main paved road through the park with a few roads that come off of it. As you drive into the park, you go up, 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 and past the visitor center, then hit this incredible landscape of red and orange sandstone monoliths. There are a few viewpoints of cool sights in the first 9 miles. Fortunately, it wasn't so much that it was distracted from just taking in the really cool views of all the rocks. Then, about halfway down the road at mile 9.2, you get to Balanced Rock on the right side of the road. You're like expecting a bunch of arches, right? And yet, this is one of the most iconic features of the park. It stands 128 feet tall now. Yet, just like a lot of other features in the park, eventually erosion will cause the 3,600-ton boulder to fall. That's right. 3,600 tons, that is over 7 million pounds, is going to come crashing down at some point. So I highly encourage that you visit the park at least once in your lifetime because who knows when the next thing will fall. I actually drove right past Balance Rock at first because my goal was to hike about 5.5 miles of the Devil's Garden Trail at the end of the road through the park. A lot of people like to do sunrise there, so keep in mind it will take about 45 minutes to drive all the way to Devil's Garden Campground and the trailhead from the entrance of the park. If you do the entire 7.9-mile loop there, you'll see 7 arches up close and a few from a distance. You'll pass Tunnel Arch and Pine Tree Arch at the beginning. Then you'll come to a fork in the path where you can go right down the more primitive trail or keep left on the main trail. Because I was still feeling the effects of my stomach virus, I stayed left and did most of the 7 arches, then turned around and came back the same way. I didn't do the full lollipop loop this visit. Now, off the main trail is Landscape Arch, which is North America's longest at 306 feet wide. The delicate top is only 6 feet wide after a huge chunk of it fell in 1991. A little further down the main trail is one of my favorite arches, Partition Arch. They basically look like 2 windows in a rock wall, one large and one small. Sitting under the larger opening is kind of scary because it is a huge drop on the other side of it. That side trail also features the Navajo Arch, named for one of the Native American tribes that originally inhabited the area, and has some cool rock formations thanks to erosion. If you go another mile on the main trail, you'll get to do a cool portion where you climb up rocks, sometimes using your hands, and it has incredible views. The trail is not well marked in places, so be on the lookout for markers. This area is very remote, so you'll probably see some wildlife that aren't afraid of people. You'll also pass the overlook for Black Arch. The scenery is a little surreal. There are these rock-like fins that come up from the ground, and behind them is a flat expanse before the mountain range. Now, as you keep walking, eventually you'll come to Double O Arch, which is 2 arches on top of each other. This is the second largest arch there, with the top one spanning 71 feet and the bottom 21 feet. From here, you can go about a half mile to Dark Angel, which is a 150-foot sandstone monolith. And then you can turn around and walk back the same way on the main trail, or take the primitive trail loop and hit Private Arch on your way back. Again, I definitely recommend doing this as early in the day as you can. Fortunately, there's a huge parking lot, so you'll likely find parking even when it's crowded, yet avoiding the hot sun is more important than avoiding the crowds. Close to the Devil's Garden is Broken Arch Trail. It's a 2.3-mile moderate loop that will show you Tapestry Arch, Broken Arch, and Sand Dune Arch. And on the drive back down the main road towards the visitor center, you'll come to what's called Fiery Furnace. This is a 2-mile round trip that will feel more like 3 to 4 miles due to its extreme terrain. You'll be jumping over rock openings, hiking in loose sand, and jumping down from ledges. The park limits the number of people that can visit each day because it is so easy to get turned around in the maze of sandstone walls that the only 2 ways you can do this hike are either with a ranger for $16 or by getting a $10 permit, which can be difficult during peak season. A 2-mile road off the main drag through the park will take you toward the famous Delicate Arch. Delicate Arch is definitely one of the most recognized features of Arches National Park, and it's the icon from the Utah license plate. There are a few ways that you can see it. If you'd like to get up close and personal with the 46-foot high Delicate Arch, you will do a 3-mile round trip steadily uphill walk. Consider when you go because a photo op here is extremely popular and you're likely to wait in line for it. However, you'll also be able to see Ute petroglyphs and the Wolf Ranch cabin on that hike as well. If you don't have time or feel like doing that 3-mile hike, and if you're okay not getting up close and personal with Delicate Arch, there are 2 overlooks that you can do very close to a parking lot. One is just about 100 meters out, and the other is about half a mile. From there, you're looking up the hill at Delicate Arch, and it's still pretty cool, even if it's not really selfie worthy. The final 2.5 miles side road that turns off the main one will take you to the windows section of the park. You can see Pothole Arch and Elephant Butte from the road. And if you park, you can take an easy 0.6-mile trail to Double Arch. Double Arch is the tallest in the park at 112 feet tall and the second longest at 144 feet wide. Another fairly easy hike here is the 1-mile Windows Trail. It will take you to North Window, South Window, and Turret Arch. You can also see the Parade of Elephants, a rock formation named for the shapes of the rock spires. It's important to remember that the landscape inside the park is always changing, mostly from water erosion. Arches here today won't necessarily be here tomorrow. At least 43 arches have fallen in the park, the most recent of which was Wall Arch that fell in 2008. Arches isn't just amazing during the day. It was named an International Dark Sky Park in 2019 for the incredible views of the stars and Milky Way. Pro tip, aim for a clear night with a new moon. That's the opposite of a full moon. It means you can't see it. And then drive as far north into the park as you can, away from any light pollution from Moab. Are you traveling with your pets? Pups aren't allowed on any of the trails in Arches National Park, so best to leave them at home. Molly was with me on our road trip, and I have a generator in the RV, so I could cool it down for her before I did some trails without her. I'd walk her in the parking lots before and after I left, and of course made sure the temperature was safe and she had plenty of water. I mentioned we stayed in Moab for all of this. There's several RV campgrounds there. We stayed at Sun Outdoors North Moab for its proximity to Canyonlands National Park and Arches National Park. There's tons to do outside of those two parks. There's a bunch of different off-roading tours, raft or kayak the Colorado River, horseback riding, canyoneering, dirt biking, and of course, visit the downtown area with a ton of cool restaurants and the Moab Brewery. That's all for Arches National Park. Have you been? What are some of your favorite parts? Send me your pictures. Find me on Instagram at the.great.escape.podcast and send me a message. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can follow along and dream big for your journeys on The Great Escape. See you next time, adventurers.